Hello and welcome to The Front Page. I'm your host Tom Kerr, and over the next 30 minutes we'll bring you all the racing debate, discussion and insight you can handle. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio today, making his Front Page debut, by Lewis Porteous. Welcome, Lewis.
Thanks for having me,
And
Tom.
regular John Harding. And via video link, our Ireland editor, Richard Forristal, who is fresh from a busy weekend of reporting on the Dublin Racing Festival. As ever, please do join in the conversation yourself. Like, comment, share and subscribe. And we'll be very interested to hear your thoughts on all the big racing matters. We're going to cut straight to the chase, though, because we have absolutely oodles to go at this week. So I'm going to go straight to Richie, who is going to talk about what else? The DRF. Richie, how was the weekend?
Excellent weekend, Tom, yeah. Great racing. I think it wouldn't be a stretch to say that 2023 was the year the Dublin Racing Festival probably came of age a little bit. It's 6 years old now. When it came initially, when its inception came about, everyone kind of thought, if you're not getting 30,000 people to Dublin over 2 days for a race fixture like this, you're doing something wrong. And up to now, they hadn't managed that. The previous record was 2021, I think, when there was 26,500 people there. 2021 would have been closed due to the pandemic. So 2020, 26,500 people there. And we've had a dramatic increase this weekend with 36,500 people, which is it's a good number. There's no two ways about it. They had 18,000 people there on Saturday. I'm not sure, I haven't had a chance to look yet, but I'm not sure the last time Leopardstown had 18,000 people in there. So in that respect, it was a big success. There was an awful lot of British visitors over. I think 27% of all tickets sold went to British clients. And you can see how it's emerging kind of as a boutique alternative, as if you like, to Cheltenham in March. A little bit more relaxed, high quality racing. It's not the same kind of 4 days of this, that and the other that Cheltenham has become. You've got 2 days of fairly clearly defined championship racing. You've got 2 mile handicap chase, 3 mile handicap, 2 mile 5 handicap chase, I should say, 2 mile handicap hurdle, 3 mile handicap hurdle. You've got, the couple of bumpers and so on. It's all very clearly defined. They're not trying to cater for every horse. And I think it works really well. Obviously, the one little cloud that hangs over it is Willie Mullins' dominance to some extent. I reckon by my count, he's won 24 of the last 35 Dublin Racing Festival races. He won 6 of the 8 Grade 1s this weekend. But that's not a Dublin Racing Festival problem. That's a problem for Irish racing and for racing as a whole, the extent to which he has emerged as the dominant force. But it was fabulous. And then we had, to look kind of specifically at the horses, we had a wonderful Gold Cup candidate emerge in Galloping des Champs. We had Honeysuckle there yesterday, beaten unfortunately, but beaten by another rising star in Stateman. And then you had Mighty Potter as well, who looks a deeply exciting novice chaser. And Barry Connell the previous day had Goodland, another really exciting novice. Good to see a couple of others apart from Willie coming up with the goods. So all told, a wonderful weekend. And probably just worth adding as well, the ground was a huge success. They've had a lot of trouble getting this right over the past 4 or 5 years, to the point that people were reluctant to run horses there, good horses that they feared would get injured on the chase course, which doesn't get watered during the summer. They got it just about right last year, and I think the confidence they've derived from that, it was repaid this time, because there was the trainers, to put it bluntly, were a lot more willing to run their good horses there, and the response over the weekend was that the ground was the best it's been at Leopardstown, in about 10 years. So well done to them for that. Tim Husbands has come in over the past few years, and I'd say maybe the single most important appointment he has made was Jane Headley, who has come in as the racing and operations manager there, and she has a lot of experience as a clerk in Britain, and she has overseen a really good job on that. So well done all round.
So a fantastic weekend for the DRF, for Irish racing. I guess there's sort of two divergent stories there, though. The first is that the sort of public appetite for the DRF is greater than ever. Some fantastic racing, some really good crowds, and by all accounts a fantastic atmosphere there. On the other hand, you do have this almost mounting dominance by Willie Mullins, winning over half the races, more than half of the Grade 1s. Do you see that as something which is potentially going to hamstring the success of the DRF going forward? And indeed, of course, it's something which racing as a whole has to grapple with, as you rightly point out.
Yeah, it's not a Dublin Racing Festival problem. It's an industry problem. And the thing to note about it, I think, is at least Willie is willing to run them against each other. And you saw with Ila Temp beating Facile Vega, who flopped. We saw it with Gentleman Demi beating Blue Lord, who flopped. You know, it happened on 4 occasions. El Fabiolo beat Appreciated in the Arkle. 4 occasions where his second and third strings stepped up. So while on the one hand we all know it's a problem and we're all talking about it because it's important to talk about it, but it'd be a lot worse if he wasn't running them. And as an aside, like, this is a separate matter. When you look at that happening all weekend, why did El Fabiolo beat Appreciated? Well, the first reason he beat Appreciated was because he was there. Same with Ilete Tamp. He was there and he was running in it. And I'm looking at the conversation that is that is now evolving in relation to Honeysuckle and where she should run at the Cheltenham Festival, or whether she should run. Obviously, we all want to see her again. I think as sports people, we want to see her again. We understand, the onus on the breeding side of things because she's a mare, fair enough. But I think it would be brilliant to see her in the champion hurdle again, because it's horse racing and it's jump racing and you don't know what can happen. We know as of yesterday, she's at least the second best 2-mile hurdler in this country. We know there's Constitution Hill, but you never know what can happen in a jump race. And I would just love to see her have one more cut at it. She won't be disgraced. I don't see the value in running her in a mare's race for a lap of honour at this point in her career. So that's another discussion. My point is, to come back to Willie, you've got to give him credit for letting them take each other on. I think he had 23 different owners represented in the Grade 1s. So it's not just one owner. We know it's a problem. There's no denying that for the sport as a whole. It's not good for competition levels. It gets tiresome, the same winning trainer coming in all the time. But from the point of view of the Dublin Racing Festival, we have to at least give him the credit for letting them take each other on and look at the races we got as a result over the 2 days.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a few of the stars there. Obviously, Honeysuckle will be fantastic to see at Cheltenham, whether she goes for the mare's hurdle or, as you suggest, and I think rightly suggest, take the chance in the champion hurdle. But we do have State Man, who's emerged now as a sort of a real contender to Constitution Hill. 11-4 generally in that market against 1-3 for Nicky Henderson, Superstar. How do you rate State Man's chances against Britain's Great White Hope?
I think he's got to have a chance. Yeah, I think he has. And you just don't know. When you put a horse like Constitution Hill again into a proper championship race where everything is happening, the gallop is strong, there's pressure coming all around him, everyone's trying to beat him, you don't know what can happen. Willie knows how to produce champion hurdle horses. We know he's very good with them. Faheen, Hurricane Fly, Annie Power, he knows how to prepare and to have a champion hurdle horse ready, as does Nicky Henderson, of course, not to say he doesn't. But is he a serious contender? I think he is. I think we needed him to step up at this stage. Honeysuckle was always going to be 9 going into this year. It was going to be hard for her, whatever. But without State Man stepping in, it would have probably been a fairly weak challenge. So it's great to see him up there. I think he is a challenger. Is he going to be good enough to beat him? Look, you're hoping against hope a little bit. But I think he's a very genuine, legitimate challenger at this stage, and it'll be great, hopefully a great race. And as I say, it would be lovely to see Honeysuckle in there. I think she's fully entitled to take her chance. She's been beaten twice now. What does it matter if she is beaten again? At this stage, it doesn't really matter. Her legacy is secure. What she has done for the sport and what Rachel Blackmore has done for the sport, will never be taken away. That's there forever. And depending on your luck on the day, anything can happen in a championship race. I'd love to see her running it.
And listen to the reaction she got from the crowd there in Dublin as well. Imagine what it would be at Cheltenham, regardless, frankly, of even whether she won. She would be cheered to the rafters going out. But, of course, if she did win, it would be one of the great sporting stories. Lewis, just to bring you in quickly, some other big stories from the DRF. Galopin des Champs, Gold Cup. Credentials were done no harm, albeit the bookmakers didn't seem wildly taken with it. How did you rate his performance?
They didn't leave much wriggle room, the bookies. It was already a 13-8 chance going in there. He wasn't really going to drastically shorten, regardless of what happened. I thought he was strong from the back of the last, which enhances Gold Cup credentials. Willie seems adamant he'll get the trip. But for the rivals looking in, I think there's enough hope there to think he maybe isn't invincible. Let's take him on. I think if the Gold Cup turns into a real slog, and they make it a proper stamina test, a lot of things can happen in that final quarter of a mile of Gold Cup. We've seen it so many times. So, of course, he's a rightful favourite, but I don't think he's a stonewall certainty myself.
Perhaps a memory of that race last March as well, just lingering in the back of people's heads.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's almost been transformed, this horse. He was like a bulldozer last year, wasn't he? He used to destroy him from the start. They're now taking him back and they're riding a race on him. And for all the world, he's looking like he will get an extreme trip now. However, I just can't see your Nicholses, your Skelton, your Emmett Mullins just handing it on a play. If they doodle round for the first circuit, he will be too quick for him in my eyes. If they turn it into a real grueling slog, you know, that's a real hard stayer, might pick him up. But it's fascinating, and he's still there with this record, and there's a lot of hope that he could be something special. So yeah, he enhances claims.
Shaping up to be a cracking Gold Cup, and another race which is now suddenly looking a bit more open, and we've complained so much about too many short prize favourites at the Cheltenham Festival, is the Supreme, which is sort of blown wide open by Facile Vega's blowout, John.
Yeah, that was a curious race and a curious ride. It was interesting to see Willie Mullins say he sort of tried to ride him like a machine rather than a racehorse, and he's going to have to be a lot more patient. I mean, I wouldn't be writing off Facile Vega just yet. He's obviously a seriously good horse, and with different tactics on a different day, I think he's still probably the one to beat. But we needed this a little bit. I found the anti-post market was getting a little bit stagnant. We had so many short price favourites. There wasn't a great deal of movement. Obviously, Trials Day at Cheltenham gave us a few upsets, which was good to sort of stimulate interest in it. But the Dublin Racing Festival has done a wonderful job of just getting us that little bit more excited, shaking it up a bit, the market. Of course, Willie Mullins still has an incredibly strong hand. That's the one constant in all of this. But I think some of the British trainers will be looking on now at those races like the Supreme and thinking they're there to be got at.
Yeah. Richie, last word to you. A great weekend of sport. What was your standout moment?
This might sound ridiculous, but just one little moment that I thought was kind of it proved, you know, what we've been witnessing with Honeysuckle over the past couple of years. I was stood in the parade ring yesterday before the champion hurdle, and I happened just briefly talking to Ruby Walsh as it happened, and we had our backs to where Honeysuckle was, and all of a sudden the parade ring kind of erupted behind us, and we didn't know what was after happening, but Rachel Blackmore was after getting up on Honeysuckle, which I just thought was, you know, it was the most, just a demonstration of the warmth and affection towards what they have achieved, I think, over the past couple of years and what they've done for the sport. It was nice to see. From a racing point of view, Tom, without getting off topic, Galopin Des Champs, I thought was really good. If he had gone around there and won on the bridle, people would be wondering, well, what does he find off it? And yet he found plenty for pressure, and the bookmakers seemingly still weren't happy. I think he's probably he's as good a favourite as you're going to get at this stage. You know, he's rock solid. I always love to see those Gold Cup horses have pace as young horses, because they need it. The best Gold Cup horses always have pace. Look at the Plutard last year. He was a good 2 miler, won Grade 1s over 2 miles. Your Cato Stars and so on. He had pace, and now they've learned to manage it and control it. And I think we're looking at something very close to the finished article.
Brilliant. And from some sublime action on the track at the DRF, we now are going to go over to Lewis Porteous for some ridiculous news off the track.
Yes, the latest twist in the whip saga, Tom. It just keeps on giving this story. We had the announcement last week that the BHA is going to reassess how the new whip rules are being applied. So we've gone from forehand to backhand to now. The latest sticking point seems to be jockeys are concerned what constitutes a rule breach, mainly in relation to this using the whip above shoulder height, which I cannot believe how we've got here, really. This was never a thorn in the side. This was never a topic spoken about. And then all of a sudden, we're now seems to be focused on using a whip above shoulder height. So it's all very concerning. We were waiting last week for the results of week 3 of the bedding in period, how many breached the rules, and we got a message from the BHA saying, we're not actually going to give you this data, which from the outset they said for transparency reasons they were going to let us have these, and they've decided, well, no, you're not having them. It seems, reading between the lines, that there must have been a heck of a lot of referrals in that week 3, and they want to go back to the drawing board on it. But
well, they say though that to be clear, the BHA say we're not looking at the rules or the guidance. It's not the problem with them; it's how the guidance is being applied. A fantastic formulation of words there from the regulator.
But who's applying it? It's a BHA stewards. It's a BHA steering group that's applying it. If they are unsure how it should be applied, what chance have the jockeys got trying to ride to these rules? It's very concerning. And you know, there was an interview last week on the TV with Sean Quinlan, he's only second to Brian Hughes in the North. This is a top-notch professional, and he looked broken. He looked beaten by it. He's been told that he would have got in the region of 50 days in bans. He's getting called in
for 1 week.
For 1 week. He's getting called in every day effectively, and he's got to the stage where he's trying so hard to stay within the rules. Owners and trainers are saying, you're not riding to your ability. So if people don't feel they can ride to the best of their ability, we might as well give up. We can't get to that. These guys have got to make a livelihood. They've got to go out there. We've come so far in making sure all horses are given the best possible chance and races are run on the merits. And now if a jockey feels he can't be at his optimum, I mean, it's just an awful situation. We
should say the BHA in some sort of Twitter exchanges disputed some of the details of what was being said there, and they said, well, you know, that this isn't the case, in fact. But you know, the fact is, we've got the new rules supposed to be coming into force on February 13. They were announced last July, John. It's kind of extraordinary that we can be here 2 weeks out from this major overhaul, such a contentious part of the sport's rules, and you know, looking at a situation which can only really be described as a total mess.
Yeah, and it was a review of the whip rules that I believe was well intentioned. I believe they went to the right people and they had the consultation. They did all the groundwork, okay, but this is a project that was designed ultimately to improve the optics of the sport. Yet the situation we find ourselves in now, I'm not sure who comes out of this looking particularly good. This looks like a sport in disarray, not one that's in control of its rules and its regulations. And not least the end of the bedding in period and the full implementation, we have right ahead of the major spring festivals, and the jockeys still are not comfortable with the rules. The BHA is still not comfortable with the application of the rules. It is just,
and there's almost no good outcomes left now, because if the BHA change the rules again, they will come in for a torrent of criticism from organisations like the RSPCA and World Horse Welfare. If they don't, and the jockeys start incurring massive bans over the Cheltenham Festival and Aintree and all the good spring racing, then there's going to be a torrent of internal criticism, but also the external bad press that would come from a bunch of whip bans during these high-profile events. So effectively, the path to a smooth introduction of these rules is so narrow as to be almost non-existent.
Yeah, and you won't hear me say this often, but I do have a degree of sympathy for the BHA because it's snookered itself, essentially, because if it backtracks on the rules, it looks weak. If it goes ahead, full steam ahead without properly consulting people, it looks too strong and it's not listening to the views of its participants. But this is, and many people will point this out, a problem entirely of its own making. I stress again, a well-intentioned one. But we've come so far now, and this sort of non-statement of we're in dialogue, we need to look at, we're just kicking the can down the road, and ultimately it's a terrible look for the sport at the moment. So hopefully they can the PJ and the BHA and everyone can smash their heads together and come to some sort of reasonable, sensible solution to how a form of the new whip rules can be applied if we're going to persevere with them, because you can't have a situation, as you say, going into the spring festivals where we're getting enormous bans, because it is a terrible, terrible look.
Richie, I understand the BHA were in Dublin this weekend speaking to some of the Irish jockeys. Any intel from how those meetings went or how the rules are being received in Ireland?
No, in short, Tom, I haven't heard about the briefing. They were there to brief them on it basically and talk them through it, as you say. I haven't heard how it went or what the reaction was. But the Irish riders are inevitably going to be on the back foot going into Cheltenham, because at least the British-based lads have had this time to be told on a daily basis where they're going wrong and so on. It's going to be, a complete transformation for the Irish lads going over there who aren't used to riding in Britain. Obviously, you'd have a small handful who would be over in the meantime, but not many. It's going to be carnage. And Jonathan has some sympathy for the BHA. He's in a fairly small minority because they brought this on themselves. They at some point they have to stop all this tinkering and back. They have always said that it's not a welfare issue, so they have to at some point back what they're doing, stand over it with confidence and say, we're happy about this, there is no welfare issue, the jockeys don't hurt the horses, they only use it a few times for encouragement on horses that are responding, and they have to move on, because at the moment they are bringing this on themselves every few months, every couple of years. They have got to start being stronger on it. It's very simple.
So the BHA obviously lead on this, Richie, but it's important that we remember that the steering group, which sort of came up with these new rules, was in fact not really a BHA group. It involved trainers. John Gosden was on it. It involved jockeys. Tom Scudamore was on it, for example. So, the sport itself and the participants also, ultimately have some culpability here, and particularly on the fact that the rules were announced last July, and it's only now that the issues with them are really being fully explored and the consequences understood.
Yeah, maybe they wanted to be seen to be doing something, Tom. I don't know, but we can see from the jockeys' reaction alone, what value had the two jockeys on that steering group? It can't have had very much. What is the point of it all? Because from the moment they tried to implement it, it has fallen apart. So I just don't know what the value of that whole process was. I see what you're saying, that it's an industry thing, but I don't have the figures to hand now, but I've written before about the surveys that have been done and about how people in Britain as a whole don't have a problem. The vast majority of people don't have a problem with horse racing and the way it's conducted. And if we're happy that the whip, as it's used, when used properly, is not a welfare issue, and it's not used excessively and it's not used to hurt the horse, then we have to at some point stop worrying about what World Horse Welfare or what the RSPCA are doing. We cannot keep tinkering and pulling away at it until the whole thing is gone to sugar, because a lot of these entities won't stop until racing is done with. They won't. They'll keep picking away and they'll never be satisfied. So at some point, racing has to be able to stand over what it's got and say, we're doing plenty right here, we're going to keep at it, and we'll do the best we can, always to ensure welfare standards are of the highest order, but we have to back our sport and keep kicking on.
Thanks, Richie. I'm going to introduce the third story, and I'm going to come back to you pretty rapidly on this one, because the story I want to discuss is Ronan McNally, who was banned last week for 12 years, the largest ban ever given to an Irish trainer by a distance, and fined €50,000 after the IHRB found him guilty of multiple integrity breaches in December. In essence, he was found guilty of conspiring with fellow trainer David Dunn to conceal the ownership of horses in his care, and of achieving a pattern of improvement which the IHRB said was previously unfamiliar to experienced and long-serving handicapping officials. They said the offences struck at the integrity of the sport and deceived the public. A swinging ban there, Richie, the largest ever, as mentioned, to an Irish trainer. First of all, can you just explain, from your perspective, why have the IHRB come down so hard on McNally?
It's a good question, and I suspect it's just because he was a bit too brazen. Because unless we're all going to sit around here and kid ourselves, we know that what he was doing is not uncommon. You could look at the results from Britain and Ireland on the day the bans were announced and see very similar strokes and coups being pulled rather blatantly. So why have they come down on him? I suspect it's because he was a bit brazen about it all, and he courted the media about it. He made plenty of it. He was happy to put himself out there and so on. And he did it to the extreme. There really wasn't much subtlety about it. And I'm not condoning it. I'm not condoning him doing it or anyone else doing it. But it is a function of this structure of horse racing as we know it these days in Britain and Ireland, that most trainers will inevitably have to keep a little bit up their sleeves, if they want horses to be able to compete and win. But he took it to extreme. The Real Deal had over 4 stone up his sleeve when he started winning. And I think the stewards, or the referrals committee, I should say, looked at it all in the round. They were able to make these associations with Kieran Fennessy and his father and brother, Liam and Aaron, and they were able to link that betting side of it. There is no suggestion that McNally benefited from any of that in relation to the laying of the horses or the betting, the backing. So it's a little bit tenuous, but when you put it all there together, you can see what happened. And I would say, right, fine. So where do we go then with the sanctions? And the sanctions are just fairly off the scale. I don't know whether in the fullness of time whether this will stand up in a court of law if it ultimately gets there, because a lot of it is circumstantial. There's no two ways about that, because the stewards on the day when these horses were supposedly being stopped from running on their merits, there was no fault found with any of them, so it's all been done retrospectively. The stewards on the day didn't have a problem, and yet here we are. He's been banned for 12 years. He can't set foot on a racecourse. He can't work in a trainer's yard. If his son Tubbs, who has been front and centre in the media, has his first ride in the next number of months or year, I'm not sure what age he is, won't be too far off. He can't go to the racetrack to watch him. So why they have gone so draconian on it, I don't know, because I suspect they've probably made a rod for their own back. Because I think it's going to be very hard to make this fly in a court of law on the basis of the evidence that was presented. Because remember, the stewards on the day, in relation to these horses, didn't have any problem with their performances. It's only all in retrospect when you're looking at it in the round and what happened afterwards. The last trainer to be banned from the sport was Philip Fenton, and that was for steroids. He was caught in possession of steroids. At the time, the labs weren't able to test for some of these substances, and he never had a horse test positive for steroids, but he was caught in possession of steroids and he received a 3-year ban. So that's the last time a trainer has actually been disqualified in Irish racing. And how you get from there to 12 years it's fairly hard to reconcile,
There have been a couple of kind of shocking cases in Ireland where the bans handed out were sort of a factor of 4 or 3 smaller. It's looking at those, it's kind of hard to say that the punishment fits the crime here.
Yeah, the legal parlance is always fair and proportionate, isn't it? Stephen Mahon, who has been done on a number of occasions for neglect and welfare issues, his most recent one is 3.5 years, 4 years, reduced to 3.5 on appeal.
Yeah.
He can work in a trainer's yard. He can go to a racecourse.
Yeah.
How do you tally that with McNally being kicked out completely? And I don't have any great sympathy for McNally. It's not that I have I'm especially fond of him or anything like that. I don't know the guy. I've spoken to him on the phone. From a professional point of view, he's not a pal or anything like that. But how do you tally what he's getting with what someone like Stephen Mahon, who has serious welfare breaches on his record, is getting when he's allowed work away with horses, go to the racecourse? You can't square that circle in my mind anyway.
No, I agree. What happens next for McNally?
He has insisted all along he will be appealing, and I think he has until the close of play tomorrow to do that. And what I don't get here is, even if he appeals successfully, and let's say it's reduced by a couple of years, sure, he's still excluded for 10 years. So I don't see how this is going to end satisfactorily anytime soon. If he has the funds and it all comes down to money, I suppose, he's ultimately probably going to go legal, I would imagine. That's just me speculating. I'm not basing that on anything. But I don't see how from where they have started with a 12-year exclusion, I don't see how this is going to end anytime soon.
Thanks, Richard. John, we're going to come to you for the final story, and this was something a little bit different because the Jockey Club put out a statement which seemed fairly uncontroversial, but inevitably, this being racing, still managed to generate plenty of sound and fury. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, so this was the news that the Jockey Club has scrapped dress codes at all of its racecourses, most notably, of course, Cheltenham, Aintree. That is with the exception of morning dress and on Derby Day in the Queen Elizabeth II stand, and you're not allowed to wear offensive clothes if you're thinking about doing that, and you're also, much to my annoyance, not allowed to wear replica sports shirts, so no Arsenal shirts at Cheltenham this year, upsettingly. But generally speaking, it just seems like an incredibly sensible move to me. I understand Derby Day, I understand separate entity Ascot saying, Royal Ascot, we want to keep the same, but I've never seen any sense in strict formal dress codes at races. British racing is not in a situation where it can create barriers to entry and it can be putting people off. It didn't tally with the rest of the world. Ireland, France don't have formal dress codes like that. And ultimately, if you want to wear a suit racing, fill your boots, not a problem at all. But there are some people that don't, and now they don't have to. So I don't really understand where the criticism was coming from. We can still nod to tradition on the big days, Derby Day, Royal Ascot, that's not a problem. But why are we putting up barriers to people coming racing, and sort of, it feels a little bit elitist to me, so. Yeah.
You can sort of say that you can always draw a direct line from this, from that story at Sandown last year. Who says the media does not have an influence? Because we reported on the case of a couple of young women who were denied entry to the Premier Enclosure at Sandown because they were wearing sort of pristine white trainers.
Trainergate.
Trainergate, indeed. Yeah, and that caused a lot of hoo-ha basically because it was kind of a shocking event. But what it spoke to was this idea that people can turn up at the races wearing, perfectly normal, smart, everyday clothes that they would be absolutely no problem wearing in 98% of offices, for example, and suddenly be told by someone on a gate, you can't come in here, denying them access to an area they've paid for, and ultimately, making people feel that they're not welcome.
Yeah, it's just weird because under the strict dress code, you're basically telling people they can't wear a certain thing. Under this new policy, which I think is excellent, you're saying you're not telling anyone they can't do anything. You can still do the thing you did before, and I would wager the majority of people at Cheltenham will still dress what we might call smart casual. They might have suit. I'm sure there'll be a hell of a lot of tweed knocking about in March.
Tweed casual. Yeah.
But there might be that select group of people who actually aren't comfortable doing that, and that is a barrier to them going, and they're going to be there wearing whatever they want within reason. It's not like they've said, you can't go and wear an entire full kit or something like that and start chanting. I don't know, but look, it's been a long time coming. Yeah. Thank God they've seen sense. I understand the exceptions. They're also incredibly logical. I didn't get it. I expected to go on Twitter and see everyone rejoicing, but there we are. That's social media for you.
Where do you stand, Lewis? An outbreak of common sense, or is this another blow to racing's traditional values?
It's wholly positive, Tom. I can't see what people are getting their knickers in a twist about. A fair play to the Jockey Club, because after that happened on Bet365 Day at Sandown, they said they'd go away and review the policy, and at that stage you're thinking that's under the carpet. But they've come out, they've made a good call. I thought the press release was really well worded, the right reasons behind it, and like John says, you can still dress up.
Yeah.
But equally, you can go what you feel comfortable in. I'm not sure it'll have a huge impact on a lot of most people. I think we just get on with it, and we saw the attendances fall last year. We cannot give potential race fans an excuse not to come. We've got to
make them feel unwelcome.
Exactly, we've got to be inclusive. Of course we have. So wholly positive, and fair play to the Jockey Club.
Absolutely. Okay, thanks very much, guys. Thanks to Richie as well. It falls to me then to determine what is this week's front page story, and no prizes for guessing. It's got to be the Dublin Racing Festival. 2 days of fantastic racing, dominated by one man, but also featuring so many fantastic performances on the track and a brilliant reception for one of the greats of the game, Honeysuckle, off it. All right, that's everything for this week. Thanks again for joining us, and thanks very much to my 3 guests. If you would like to get lots more Racing Post journalism, our Members Club Ultimate service, a full subscription that gives you access to digital newspaper, all the great journalism by the Racing Post, our top tipsters like Paul Keeley and Tom Segal, race replays, and lots more on top of that, is on a special offer, 50% off for the first 3 months. The details are down below, and you can also do that all-important liking, commenting, subscribing and sharing down there, I imagine. Please do join us again next week for lots more discussion about all the big topics in racing. But for this week, goodbye.